Part 6 of The Club of Queer Trades. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Club of Queer Trades by G.K. Chesterton. Part 6. The Eccentric Seclusion of the Old Lady. The conversation of Rupert Grant had two great elements of interest. First, the long fantasias of detective deduction in which he was engaged, and second, his genuine romantic interest in the life of London. His brother Basil said of him, "His reasoning is particularly cold and clear, and invariably leads him wrong, but his poetry comes in abruptly and leads him right." Whether this was true of Rupert as a whole or no, it was certainly curiously supported by one story about him, which I think worth telling. We were walking along a lonely terrace in Brompton together. The street was full of that bright blue twilight which comes about 8:30 in summer, and which seems for the moment to be not so much a coming of darkness as the turning on of a new azure illuminator, as if the earth were lit suddenly by a sapphire sun. In the cool blue, the lemon tint of the lamps had already begun to flame, and as Rupert and I passed them, Rupert talking excitedly, one after another the pale sparks sprang out of the dusk. Rupert was talking excitedly because he was trying to prove to me the 999th of his amateur detective theories. He would go about London with this mad logic in his brain, seeking a conspiracy in a cab accident, and a special providence in a falling fusee. His suspicions at the moment were fixed upon an unhappy milkman who walked in front of us. So arresting were the incidents that afterwards overtook us that I am really afraid that I have forgotten what were the main outlines of the milkman's crime. I think it had something to do with the fact that he had only one small can of milk to carry, and that of that he had left the lid loose and walked so quickly that he spilled milk on the pavement. This showed that he was not thinking of his small burden, and this again showed that he anticipated some other than lacteal business at the end of his walk, and this, taken in conjunction with something about muddy boots, showed something else that I have entirely forgotten. I am afraid that I derided this detailed revelation unmercifully, and I am afraid that Rupert Grant, who, though the best of fellows, had a good deal of the sensitiveness of the artistic temperament, slightly resented my derision. He endeavoured to take a whiff of his cigar, with the placidity which he associated with his profession, but the cigar, I think, was nearly bitten through. "My dear fellow," he said acidly, "I'll bet you £half-a-crown that wherever that milkman comes to a real stop, I'll find out something curious." "My resources are equal to that risk," I said, laughing. "Done." We walked on for about a quarter of an hour in silence, in the trail of the mysterious milkman. He walked quicker and quicker, and we had some ado to keep up with him. And every now and then he left a splash of milk, silver in the lamplight. Suddenly, almost before we could note it, he disappeared down the area steps of a house. I believe Rupert really believed that the milkman was a fairy. For a second he seemed to accept him as having vanished. Then, calling something to me which somehow took no hold on my mind, he darted after the mystic milkman, and disappeared himself into the area. I waited for at least 5 minutes, leaning against a lamp-post in the lonely street. Then the milkman came swinging up the steps without his can, and hurried off clattering down the road. 2 or 3 minutes more elapsed, and then Rupert came bounding up also, his face pale, but yet laughing, a not uncommon contradiction in him, denoting excitement. "My friend," he said, rubbing his hands, "so much for all your scepticism, so much for your Philistine ignorance of the possibilities of a romantic city. 2 and 6pence, my boy, is the form in which your prosaic good nature will have to express itself." "What?" I said incredulously. "Do you mean to say that you really did find anything the matter with the poor milkman?" His face fell. "Oh, the milkman," he said, with a miserable affectation of having misunderstood me. "No, I didn't exactly bring anything home to the milkman himself. "What did the milkman say and do?" I said with inexorable sternness. "Well, to tell the truth," said Rupert, shifting restlessly from one foot to another, "the milkman himself, as far as merely physical appearances went, just said, 'Milk, miss,' and handed in the can. That's not to say, of course, that he did not make some secret sign or some—" I broke into a violent laugh. "You idiot," I said. "Why don't you own yourself wrong and have done with it? Why should he have made a secret sign any more than anyone else? You own he said nothing and did nothing worth mentioning. You own that, don't you?" His face grew grave. "Well, since you ask me, I must admit that I do. It is possible that the milkman did not betray himself. It is even possible that I was wrong about him." "Then come along with you," I said with a certain amicable anger, "and remember that you owe me £half-a-crown." "As to that, I differ from you," said Rupert coolly. "The milkman's remarks may have been quite innocent. Even the milkman may have been. But I do not owe you £half-a-crown. For the terms of the bet were, I think, as follows, as I propounded them, that wherever that milkman came to a real stop, I should find out something curious." "Well?" I said. "Well," he answered, "I jolly well have. You just come with me." And before I could speak he had turned tail once more and whisked through the blue dark into the moat or basement of the house. I followed almost before I made any decision. When we got down into the area, I felt indescribably foolish, literally, as the saying is, in a hole. There was nothing but a closed door, shuttered windows, the steps down which we had come, the ridiculous well in which I found myself, and the ridiculous man who had brought me there, and who stood there with dancing eyes. I was about to turn back when Rupert caught me by the elbow. "Just listen to that," he said, and keeping my coat gripped in his right hand, he rapped with the knuckles of his left on the shutters of the basement window. His air was so definite that I paused and even inclined my head for a moment towards it. From inside was coming the murmur of an unmistakable human voice. "Have you been talking to somebody inside?" I asked suddenly, turning to Rupert. "No, I haven't," he replied with a grim smile, "but I should very much like to. Do you know what somebody is saying in there?" "No, of course not," I replied. "Then I recommend you to listen," said Rupert sharply. In the dead silence of the aristocratic street at evening, I stood a moment and listened. From behind the wooden partition, in which there was a long lean crack, was coming a continuous and moaning sound, which took the form of the words, "When shall I get out? When shall I get out? Will they ever let me out?" or words to that effect. "Do you know anything about this?" I said, turning upon Rupert very abruptly. "Perhaps you think I am the criminal," he said sardonically, "instead of being in some small sense the detective. I came into this area 2 or 3 minutes ago, having told you that I knew that there was something funny going on, and this woman behind the shutters, for it evidently is a woman, was moaning like mad. No, my dear friend, beyond that I do not know anything about her. She is not, startling as it may seem, my disinherited daughter or a member of my secret seraglio. But when I hear a human being wailing that she can't get out, and talking to herself like a madwoman, and beating on the shutters with her fists, as she was doing 2 or 3 minutes ago, I think it worth mentioning. That is all." "My dear fellow," I said, "I apologize. This is no time for arguing. What is to be done?" Rupert Grant had a long clasp knife, naked and brilliant, in his hand. "First of all," he said, "housebreaking." And he forced the blade into the crevice of the wood and broke away a huge splinter, leaving a gap and glimpse of the dark window pane inside. The room within was entirely unlighted, so that for the first few seconds the window seemed a dead and opaque surface, as dark as a strip of slate. Then came a realization that, though in a sense gradual, made us step back and catch our breath. 2 large, dim, human eyes were so close to us that the window itself